Come restore and make us new. God, we need.
And welcome back to Everyday Faith Radio. This is Jeff Gaffney, your host, and with us on the program today is my friend Brian Mininger. Brian is a real estate entrepreneur and builder in Central Virginia. Brian, thanks for being on the show.
It's great to be with you.
Hey, I've got to tell you a little bit about my week, so if you don't mind, I'm going to hog the mic just to start with, and then I know you've brought some good word that we're going to unpack here in just a few minutes, but what an amazing week for me. It was an unexpected week. My mother-in-law, sweet woman, who I love dearly, went into the hospital for what we thought was a kidney stone, and after 5 days at the University of Virginia Hospital, we find out that it is metastatic cancer. It's metastasized and it's in different organs, and long story short, she's now in hospice. And so you go in with one set of expectations. You know, this is going to be fairly quick, deal with the stone, and then you end up with kind of the verdict from the doctors of, you know, what we all dread to hear, that you have cancer and there's nothing that can be done. And so it was heartbreaking. It's been a heartbreaking week. A lot of sadness in our family. My wife in particular, it's her mother, her last parent, and her brother and sister, of course, the 3 children. Very, very sad time. And so we have that as just kind of a fact. It's a sad time. It feels a little bit like if your heart was made out of glass, it's as if somebody has kind of smashed it with a hammer. And so you find your heart in little tiny pieces because, again, it's so unexpected and such devastating news. And so as sad as that is, what I have found is during those terrible, terrible times in life, that if you turn to the Lord and rely on His presence, there is a moment or two, and I've actually had several, and our family has experienced several moments of God's grace and God's beauty and certainly His presence. And in those moments, and for me, Brian, what you don't know is that for our listeners on this show, I just went through this a month ago with my sister's daughter. So my niece, same kind of situation, 19 years old. And so our listeners have been so kind because they've been sending me notes and texts and saying that they have been praying for me. And so we're just getting over that, and now we go into this situation. And so the verse that I called the victory verse to start the program has been something that has turned, instead of words on the paper, words that you would read, have really been tested for me and proven to be true. And so the verses from 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, where it says, rejoice always. Well, how are we to rejoice when we just find out that a loved one is going on hospice? But we are called to do that and pray without ceasing. We've all been doing that, and we've really been experiencing the presence of God during our prayer. And by the way, you know the verse in the Bible where Jesus says, where 2 or more are gathered in my name, I will be there with them. That verse we found to be true, because as we link up and pray with our mother-in-law, we have found that really kind of invites Jesus in the room. And that's been very, very powerful. And then the last part of that verse that the Apostle Paul talks about, 1 Thessalonians, where he says, and give thanks in all circumstances. So rejoice, pray, give thanks. It's one thing when that is, again, words on the paper that you're reading. It's another thing when you take it to be God's truth and you put it into practice and you say, okay, well, Lord, I'm going to really just rely on you here. And it's been a phenomenal week because you have, the highs and lows of this, really. I mean, a lot of low times, but the high points have been when God has come in and kind of taken our hearts collectively and super glued them back together, and just to have the touch of God during these tough times. And I just want to encourage any of our listeners that are going through anything like that or going through tough times to really dig into God's Word. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, and I guess as you talk, I think we've all been through tough things. You've been through other tough things, like you said, even just not that long ago. And I don't know that I always understand what that verse means of God being with us and rejoicing in these circumstances. But somehow it always reaps a harvest. There's always something that comes out of it that's hard to see in the middle of it. And I think even as you're talking, I hear you saying, like, hey, there was this struggle, but here's the blessing in the midst of it.
Yes.
And some of those times that you'll remember back, memories with your mother-in-law that carry us through. But it's tough in the midst of it. There's no doubt about that. There's no denying that.
And relying on the promises of God, relying on that and having that be kind of the foundation, and sometimes we're forced into that situation. Right. And I, it was really, our whole family is really kind of, really, really desperate for God to show up, and He has. And again, it's as sad as it has been, and tragic and unexpected to see God moving. The other thing that happens is when you're in a hospice situation is you have the opportunity for people to kind of come in and come together. And so there's that relational aspect, and Jesus all throughout the Bible, and particularly the New Testament, is always having dinner with people, and he's always all about the relationship. And I have found that there's an opportunity, and we witnessed it, where there's an opportunity for people to kind of come together and have a moment of forgiveness, asking for forgiveness and granting some forgiveness. And a moment like this provides that opportunity.
Yeah, it's like you're saying there, it's the relationships that go deeper in these times, and maybe that's the blessing in it. That's hard to see. I mean, none of these things are things we'd sign up for.
No.
I mean, you would not have chosen for this to happen, and yet it does.
No.
And I think maybe that's where all the blessing is. But
Well,
it's always hard to see sometimes.
And I also had a teacher of mine one time who talked about, he said, oftentimes you don't experience Jesus when you're swinging in a hammock. It's, although we need those times, we need rest, we need to kind of restore our bodies, but oftentimes it's in the struggle, it's in the pain and the suffering. And as you read through the Bible, all the different apostles, particularly in the New Testament, talk about, as awful as the suffering is, that at some point you're able to count it all joy. And having experienced that, I start to understand what exactly they're talking about when Jesus comes in the room.
Yeah, I read recently that you only know that Jesus is all you need when you're at a point where He's all you have. And that only happens in these struggle times. They don't happen on the mountaintop, and it doesn't happen in the hammock, so to speak, as you said. But that's when we see it.
So my mother-in-law is one of course, my favorite people on the planet. She's been a faithful listener to this show. I know she's tuning in now, and I'll just tell her again that I love you, and I just pray for you. And I know because of her relationship with the Lord. She loves Jesus. And so the Bible makes it very clear that whoever believes in Jesus and has faith, hope, and trust in Jesus Christ will enjoy eternal life. And so with that knowledge and understanding, as hard as it is, we know that she's going to a place where there's no more pain and suffering, no more tears. Her husband is there, her mother is there, and soon she'll be, just dancing with Jesus. And so it's, again, as hard as this week has been, the Apostle Paul also says that although we mourn as people. This is to the Christian community and those that are believers in Jesus Christ, that we mourn as those who have hope, and we have that confident expectation that you'll enjoy eternal life. Thank you to our listeners for allowing me to kind of download this again. It's like Act 2, or somebody might say Act 7, but anyway, this is Everyday Faith Radio again. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to take a break. We're going to get into some more Word with Brian Miniger. Please stay with us. Welcome back to Everyday Faith Radio. This is Jeff Gaffney, your host. Thank you so much for joining us today. And with us on the program, we have my friend Brian Miniger. Brian, again, thank you for letting me hog the mic on the first half of the show. Our listeners have been so sweet and supportive to me as I've gone through different things. And when I set out to do this show, I had no idea that kind of my faith journey was going to be. We were all of our listeners were going to be sharing in that together. Right. That was not the intent, but that His ways are not my ways. And but anyway, thank you again for being on the show. I want to give you some opportunity to share what God has put on your heart this week, and maybe talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I guess as I was thinking about this, your intro talks about people that are in the workplace or maybe at home or at school. But I find myself on a daily basis, like you do, in the business community, in the marketplace, doing my work. And for years, there was kind of a disconnect in my life between, I thought I should be a good person as a Christian in the marketplace, but did it really affect my work? And a couple years ago, God started leading me on a journey of just digging in to see what the Word has to say about what I do every day. And I've been in construction for years. Does it really have anything to say about building? And so I wanted to kind of share something that's just been continuous encouragement to me. And it actually has to do with how we were created. In Genesis 1 and 2, we see God creating, and He takes things that are formless and void and He starts putting the pieces together. But then it goes on and says that He created us in His image, and He put us in dominion to rule over the world. And I realize that there's something creative about our nature, that when I'm building a house, that I am functioning in that same capacity that God did when He created the world, that I'm continuing His creative work, because God created the trees and the rocks and all those things, but then we get to take that stuff and create a house or create a business that somebody gets to live in and enjoy. I don't know how to create an iPhone, but God created the minerals and then created people that could take those elements and create an iPhone. And that's what's different from us and all the other animals, creatures that walk this earth. But I think the thing that really encouraged me about this is I realized that so many times in our culture, and even in other religions, work is seen as something kind of beneath us, that like spiritual things are this higher level and our work is lower. But what we see in Genesis is that God created work before the fall. That when sin entered and created the struggle with work, that was not God's original plan. That was after the fact. And that there's this fulfillingness to what we do every day that allows us to do it and do it well. It's not just that I need to be a Christian when I go to work there every day, but when I'm managing a construction site or when I'm leading a team of people, that is as much a spiritual activity as when I'm standing in church on Sunday morning singing worship songs.
We're talking with Brian Mininger, and this is Everyday Faith Radio. Brian, good for you on that connection. I see it, I get it, as you pointed out to me. God himself was the master builder, and sort of passed the baton to you and other builders, and I see that connection, and I can see it with you as you take that as an opportunity to honor the Creator who created you through building. I get it. That's good.
Well, I've even kind of taken it so far in my own thinking to say that God is an entrepreneur. I mean, what is entrepreneurship? It's creating something out of nothing.
Yes.
It's I have an idea, I have a concept, I can speak, and those things start coming into being, and that's what God did when He spoke and created everything that we see around us. And so He was maybe the first entrepreneur, and so when we're building businesses, we're creating jobs and opportunities and livelihoods and making the world around us a better place. Like, that's part of our mandate that God created us for. It's not something that's beneath us or something we need to escape from so we can retire or go on vacation. It's part of what God created us to be, and there's fulfillment in it when we understand that. But so many times we think, okay, I just need to do this to get to, like, I really think that a Christian should not ever come with, okay, I'm sorry this is Monday and I'm living for the weekend. Like, God did not create us to live that way. He created us to enjoy everything we set our hands to.
Well, it's taken me a while to get there in my career. I'm not a builder, but I'm in the real estate business, and so I have noticed that the greatest evangelist of all time, the Apostle Paul, was a tent maker.
Right.
And so that's a little bit of real estate if you use
Right.
your imagination there. And so I get it, kind of where you're coming from, and that fits for me because, you know, I take my real estate practices, that's my tent making, and I try to do it in a way that honors God, and I believe bringing God into my workplace, I believe in that. And then the other part of my business, and I'm interested if this relates to you at all, but I see my business is really my ministry, because I'm dealing with people in oftentimes stressful situations. They're selling a home is stressful, moving is stressful, buying a home, relocating families from one state, from another country to here, and it's really an honor to help people in that transition, either coming in or going out. And so the punchline for me on that is I see that as an opportunity. As Jesus was washing the feet of his disciples, I take it as an opportunity to do my own foot washing for my clients, and sometimes that's not easy to do, but Jesus modeled out how to really serve. I mean, serve to the max, right? I mean, he gave it all, but in that moment of washing his disciples' feet, I think he really modeled out humility and service, and that's really changed my heart as I go out and meet with families and try to help them in their real estate day-to-day needs. I look at it as an opportunity for, you know, my business is my ministry, and I look at it as an opportunity to serve and literally wash their feet.
Wait, it's interesting you say that, because it's easy for us in our church culture to define ministry as something that happens within the church or on a mission field. But I think the simplest understanding is ministry is serving others. If you look at Jesus' ministry, not only did he forgive people's sins and heal people, he also fed people, which met their daily needs. And so when you're serving your clients, because that's what God's called you to do, it's every bit as ministry as the pastor who stands up on Sunday morning and preaches the word. God has a place and a calling for all of us. In that we need the person that ministers the word, and we need the person that ministers to find a home and grow food as the farmer does so that we can all eat. It's all ministry, and I think many times in our minds we've separated that and we lose sight of the bigger picture that God has for us in what we do each and every day.
Yeah. Well, the other thing I just thought of, and we're talking with Brian Mininger on Everyday Faith, is Jesus was a carpenter, right?
That's exactly right.
And so Jesus was also the master builder, and so that, sorry, I'm a little slow, but I just made that connection now. You know, you got God the builder, you have Jesus the master carpenter.
As a former carpenter, I've never missed that one. I got that one years ago.
Oh, well, I tell you, Brian, it is for me kind of the walk of faith in business is also this, is when I meet with clients and it doesn't work out, I sort of feel like that for me, God has kind of protected me, and He has really kind of chosen for me who I'm to work with, and I also believe by faith that when things don't work out, and they don't choose me or whatever, that He's also kind of chosen for me who I'm not to work with,
right.
and when I rest in that, I go home every night feeling very very satisfied, because again, when you live your life and it's all about the gospel, it's not about what Brian Mininger has done or Jeff Gaffney has done, but it's what Jesus has done for us. Right. And so what that allows us to do is it really kind of takes the pressure off. We go out, we serve, we know that we can bring to this community our skills and talents, and doing it in a way that honors God. And I really believe that in this town of Charlottesville, Virginia, I really believe that the Spirit of God is moving through Charlottesville, Virginia. I see men like you and I, in women and young people of all ages, diversity, people that are really dedicating themselves to the Lord. And I really think God is doing something special in Charlottesville, Virginia. This is Everyday Faith Radio. Thank you so much for joining us. To my mother-in-law and family going through a tough time this weekend, may the Lord bless you and keep you, and may His face shine upon you and bring you peace. This is Everyday Faith Radio. We'll see you next week. Thanks for joining us.
Great job, guys. There's not much we could say to you.
No. Go be where you need to be.
Yeah, exactly.
Brian, good to meet you, buddy.
This'll be
Nice to meet you.
Make us need